Thanks so much, Emily, for joining us today. We are off to start a new Coffee and Code chat with Code Like a Girl. My name is Lara. I work at Code Like a Girl for anyone watching. And we have Emily from EA Games today.
Hello.
We're going to go through chatting about like your career, Emily, and what prompted you to choose a career in games development, and we'll get into like how you got into it and everything, but maybe we'll start with that first question. What prompted you to choose a career in games development?
So I definitely fell into a career in games development completely by accident. At school, I didn't know that I was going to like programming. I went to an all-girls private school. We didn't have programming on the curriculum. I think maybe nobody did back then. I just got an invite to my 20-year school reunion, so it was a long time ago now. Trying to think about it. So
Time flies.
I always
That's
liked,
when you're having fun.
science and maths. I love maths. I love physics. I was like, oh, I love space. I'll maybe try and get into maybe I'll do astrophysics or something. So I went to uni with I'm going to do physics and engineering because I had the marks, and it's like maybe there seems like there might be a job at the end of an engineering degree, whereas I wasn't clear about the paths in science. And I had to do in first year a compulsory introduction to programming, learn C, learn how to program, in order to further my goals as some kind of mechanical engineer, I guess. And I loved it. It was easily my best subject by a good, 20 points by the time the exam results had come out. It's easily my best subject. I loved it. So I changed my degree after one semester of uni to be software engineering instead of previously, I think I was mechanical engineering, which I did not find nearly so enthralling. First year mechanical engineering things is like looking at the stress factors in different materials. It was not for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I swapped into software engineering after one semester, and then in my third year we did graphics, and my tutor in graphics, or in fact the head tutor, not actually my specific tutor, had a startup indie games company, and during the let's do some prep for the exam end of semester exam prep tutorial, he was like, if any of you want a holiday internship / come and work for us for not very much money, then you should apply to my game studio. So I did. In fact, I think 3 or so of my friends from that year all applied, and we did it at slightly different times. So I had a summer job with this indie game studio. And at the end of that, they basically sat me down and said, we'd like you to stay on part-time and then work with us when you finish your degree. And so that's how I got into games.
What a good opportunity. That's so cool. Were you interested in games prior to that, or prior to studying, getting, you said the C# course was the one that caught your eye and got you into programming? Were you into games at that stage and thinking you might like to program in that sense, or?
Not really. It wasn't something that had ever crossed my mind.
Really?
Video games were a thing that mostly my brother had played as kids.
Yep.
I watched my brother play Zelda rather than playing Zelda myself.
Me too.
I did eventually. I bought my own secondhand Nintendo 64, but I never played with it really. So in the end, I sold it on for a profit.
Nice.
After having it for 2 years.
Nice. Good little
vintage. Games weren't a big part of my childhood specifically. I was much more into reading.
Really?
Yeah.
There's the stories and stuff might take you through.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So yeah, games was something that I really hadn't considered. But when you start to consider a career in programming, I think games are, to me, they seem way more interesting than I'm working for a bank and figuring out, I don't know, shares or something, or and it's a lot more interesting of an application than perhaps
it's more creative.
Other careers. Yeah, more creative. That's a better way of putting it.
Oh, well, you're
So
living my dream, Emily. I got into programming for the similar reason that my brother would play Zelda all the time, and my favorite pastime was watching him play. I didn't even want to play. I think I just loved watching him play, probably because I wasn't very good at it. But getting a career, like building the games that you grew up with is pretty exciting. Like, what area of games design are you in?
So I've moved around a little bit, throughout my career. So from that start and that sort of indie startup game, we were an indie studio. We were working for basically, being paid by another studio to make a game with them. So my first title that I worked on was Pony Friends 2 for the Nintendo
Oh,
DS,
cool.
which
That's so
was not a game targeted at me or adults at all. This is a game where you like pat ponies, you can wash ponies, you can ride ponies and take photos of animals on the trails. It's pretty cute.
Oh,
It's for like,
pretty
8-year-old
cute.
girls. It was pretty
Yeah.
cute. And I'm very proud of the fact that Pony Friends 2 can be completed. There was in fact an animal that you meant to take photos
Ah,
of in Pony Friends 1 that is missing. It is not in the
ah.
code base of the game.
Wow, really little Easter egg there.
Um,
Or
that
lack
was my
thereof.
first, game. And then, timing for this was around 2008. So just as I finished uni, we also hit the global financial crisis. And one of the
Mm,
outcomes for that for the Australian games industry was that a lot of overseas studios pulled out of Australia
mm,
because we became more expensive comparatively because our economy stayed
mm.
strong. Um,
Wow.
what happened for me there was our indie studio, ran out of money, but we convinced another local Melbourne indie studio to basically merge with us, take on all of our
Mm.
staff, and they had just signed a deal with EA to make a Need for Speed game on mobile. So
Oh,
I
okay,
rolled into
cool.
that, and then that studio then got bought by EA the next year, and that's how I ended up working for EA. So I was working on mobile games for kind of the first half of my career with that studio. We were kind of like basically bringing out mobile games in the early iPhone era. Once a year we'd have release a title for money. Remember when you used to pay for money and for games on your phone, um,
Yeah.
and that. So I worked on several titles there before eventually transitioning into our engine team. So we had a
Mm.
engine team that we used by all the games on in that studio. I moved into the engine team. Um, and then after several more years as sort of the part of the engine team in Fire Monkeys, our whole engine team, basically, our whole team got moved into being part of Frostbite at
Oh,
EA.
okay, right.
So that's where I am now. I'm part of the Frostbite team at EA, which is, a in terms of like scope growing, you hear this little indie game, and then you're like, "Oh, we're making mobile games," and then you're like, "I'm in the engine team for mobile games," and it's like, "Oh no, now you're part of the engine team for like really big blockbuster EA games." Um,
Wow.
and I've always found it very motivating to think that the things I'm working on are in the hands of a lot of people. Like, I think that's really
Yeah.
cool, and it's a cool part of being in entertainment specifically. Like, we are making things that are fun that people just straight up enjoy.
Mm.
Nobody is forced to use my code, but lots of people use it, and
People are
it's
choosing to
exciting.
use it. Yeah, they're like selecting it by choice and having a good time with it. That's so cool. I have so many questions. From when you studied so you switched to software engineering, what was I guess the average divide of gender in your classrooms? Do you recall?
I'm sure I'm looking back on this with rosy lenses because I remember that like I had plenty of women friends in my course,
Really?
but like when I say plenty, I had like three.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. Because
So like
I studied games design as well. I only a minor, so I shouldn't really claim it. But I was the only one in my cohort.
on all of the things I did. Like I remember being sitting, in groups doing group work, and it was, me and my friends and our friends, and our group was, it probably wasn't quite 50-50. They were probably like
Yeah,
40,
close
60,
to.
but that was my group of friends. Like if I look beyond
Right.
that at the rest of the class, I
Yeah,
don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember how many
can't
people
remember.
were. Probably what happened is that all of the women ended up in like 2 or 3 friendship groups within the classes. And there were
Yeah.
probably whole other friendship groups with no women in them at all. But I wasn't in
Yeah,
those
right.
groups and I don't remember them. So my memories
Oh,
are that it was way less unbalanced than it probably was.
yeah. I was how does it go now that you're in the industry? What do you think it's like now? What's your opinion of, or what's your
I have
experience with?
I have definitely been in rooms when I looked around and realized I was the only woman in the room. Um,
Mm,
and those moments of realization happen to me relatively rarely. But because they
mm,
only happen to me in like different situations. If I travel somewhere for work and I'm at a summit and I look around and assess, oh, I'm the only woman at this summit. And
you're
that
at a
gives me that,
summit and you're the only woman.
I mean, not
That's
an
a
internal summit. So it's like, sort of the leadership in my team or whatever. Like it was not,
right.
this is not among hundreds of
Yeah, I was
people.
gonna
This was like a
ask about
summit
the
with like
leadership.
20, 25 people or whatever. And it's like, oh, I'm the only woman here.
Mm,
That's a bit odd.
mm,
Um, but I am blind to it day to day for the most part.
mm.
I don't ever
You're
look
so
around at the
ingrained in
group
it.
of people who I've worked with for 5 years and be like, oh, I'm the only woman here, because they're not just generic people. They
Of
are
course, yeah.
guys that I've been friends with and worked with, my colleagues who
Yeah.
they're just, of course, it's these particular people, my colleagues that I work with every day.
Yeah.
It's hard
That's
sometimes
great that you haven't
to see
felt.
through it.
Yeah.
And I think I
That's
had the
awesome
training of
though
the
that
all girls high school was like, I don't expect, I guess, in my life to see balanced gender groupings.
yeah, right. That's so like that's great that it doesn't affect you that much in
I'm
your like
lucky
it's
that it
sounds like
doesn't affect me.
you've met some because I think like I was looking at something the other day in preparation for our chat about the I think it's called the Games Developers Association of Australia. I don't
Yep.
know how much you have to do with that, but I was looking at some stats there, and they were saying that women take up about 20% in Australia of the like workforce, but they did say that that's in terms of careers, but in terms of education and studies, I think it's like 35%, which is kind of good because it means that like that's a trend that like it is, improving. But in terms of like leadership and senior positions, it's rare to find a woman like yourself in there. So
I
kudos to
think it
you.
can be really hard. Like
Yeah,
I've
it
been
would be.
extremely lucky that the particular colleagues that I've worked with have all been amazing. They're
Yeah,
all great developers and also great people, and not
that's
everybody
awesome.
is both of those things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, tell me what's some how big is your company? So you merged with EA, so EA is obviously quite a large organization. How big's the team that you're on?
So EA itself is a giant global corporation. It has, I think, about 13,000 people these days.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
Frostbite team within that is about 500 people,
Right, okay.
which is still quite a lot, and we're quite
Yeah, it's big.
globally distributed. There's
Oh, okay. I was
a
gonna
big team
ask.
in Vancouver, a big team in Stockholm. We've got, I think, about 60 odd people for Frostbite in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And then of those people, I kind of work with two cell teams that I work with kind of day to day. So maybe like 12 to 15 people in Melbourne who I'm working with directly.
Okay. So a relatively like a manageable team that you'd work directly with.
And I also have some people in Vancouver who I work directly with. Again, another team of about 10-ish people who I
Cool.
work directly with in Vancouver or Seattle. Some of them are in Seattle, but it's all the same time zone. So kind of
Yeah.
lines can blur.
Yeah, fair enough. That's awesome. What's a day in the life look like for you? Like, what are you doing day to day?
Well, one, I'm not programming anymore.
You're not programming anymore?
I'm not programming anymore. In fact, relatively recently, I finally got my title changed to my new title, which is I'm a product manager, technical product manager
Ooh,
in Frostbite. So
congrats.
thank you. So my day to day is like, my job is to decide what we should be doing or why we should be
Okay.
doing it. So, I talk to game teams, I talk to other areas of Frostbite, and I try and prioritize in my sphere all of the different asks and requirements, all the things we could do, which frankly is a lot. There's so much we could do,
Yeah,
and trying to figure out, well,
it's
okay,
always the
we
way.
could do this whole big list, but for the next 6 months, let's focus on these top couple of items. So my day to
Yeah.
day is um, a lot of meetings, which
Mm.
as a there's a kind of like a career progression you go on where you feel initially you start off like meetings feel like a total distraction. You should be getting back to programming, and you eventually realize
Mm-hmm.
that meetings are work too. And then you kind of
Mm-hmm.
get to a point where it's like, oh, I wish I could be doing a little bit of programming. And then you're like, oh, well, programming's not my job anymore. I'm at the programming's not my job anymore part of my career. It's like I like the other parts of my
Right.
career too, or I wouldn't have gone this
Yeah.
way. But I do
Yeah.
miss programming sometimes.
I've always wondered that with like moving into a leadership position, like to be honest, I've avoided it. I've been asked to be like a manager before, and I love coding, so I don't want to take my hands off the tools. But I think there's still opportunity to be creative and find that like balance of programming
I
and
mean,
leading
yeah,
at the same time.
for me, it happened very kind of gradually. The kind of
Yeah,
realization that as a lead, I can get more done of the things that I think are
yeah,
important because I can get other
that's
people to do
awesome.
them who, frankly, a lot of them are better than me.
Yeah, that's another good thing is realize
Like,
when you need to pass the torch.
yeah, realizing that you
When
can train people up who start young
yeah,
and eager and end up better than you. That's great. When people who you've like taken under your wing are like suddenly they're amazing and you're like, wow,
yeah.
this is so good. So
Well, you made
that's
that
fun.
happen.
Exactly, you can make that happen.
Yeah, you've
And
contributed
just
to that.
having more people.
Yeah,
Like as a team leader, more things can happen than I can personally do. And I can get
yeah.
satisfaction. And frankly, it's about being able to take credit for other people's work. Like if I didn't feel like I could have my team do a bunch of things and I couldn't personally feel like I did that because I made them do it. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have the same satisfaction.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's so how many so you're leading like teams of people. Are you working on multiple games at the moment or do you split it up?
So as in being part of Frostbite, we're an engine team and we are supporting multiple games
Mm,
at once. Um,
right.
So, the Frostbite engine is used by, a lot of EA Sports titles. It's used by Battlefield titles. It's used by, various other games at other times in EA. We have, a number of games on the go all the time. And as an
Right.
engine team, you are trying to give them the things they need to get their job done. Like the engine already exists.
Mhm.
So in some respects, it's like the engine exists, therefore games can be made on it. But each new game has got a new thing that they want to do, or something that they want to take further, or they want to be more exciting or better. And so they have requests for, hey, Frostbite, it'd be great if the engine did this. And you're like, that would be great. Let's see if we can do it. Or sometimes you're like, well, I'm not sure that that's something that the engine should do. Is any other game team ever going to want to do that? So we kind of
Right.
have those discussions, like which work is the work that we should do as a central team that then all teams can benefit by. I don't
Right.
know if
Do you
that
have
answers your
does
question at all because I
it
completely lost track
kind
of the
of
question.
it's always the way when you're having a chat. Does it kind of work in the way that designers will come to you and say like we want to achieve this storyline or do this sort of thing, and then the Frostbite team will come together and try to make that functional, or the other way around?
It's usually game teams coming to us. It's
Yeah.
rarely a specific designer on a game team. Usually, the designers talking to their leadership or their the visionaries on the actual game team, and they sort of decide, oh well, we could try doing it within our team, or maybe we'll get the Frostbite team to do it. So, I mean, it's a big business with lots of different teams that are separated. And so we're trying to, encourage close collaboration between us and the game teams. But ultimately, there's all these like chains of hierarchy going up and back down, and we try and talk across because that's the only way to get anything done.
Wow.
Yes,
That's
ultimately,
cool.
someone comes to us from a game team for a request of, we would like Frostbite's help to do XYZ. And we're like, okay, well, we think that will take us so many people in so much time, and this is when we could do it for you.
Is it like something that you'd be working on a feature of the games engine for like a month, or does it take quite much longer than that, or is it really variable?
Usually, we are trying to plan at a kind of maybe twice a year release schedule of like, oh, we'll get things done in the next 6 months. Because there are some things that people come to us like, oh, we found this bug, or we found this problem, and it's really important to us, and our game's meant to ship in 2 months. Can you help? And we'll say, of course we can help. That sounds really important and scary. So there are like quick turnaround things, which is a lot more frequently bugs, because you can't plan for bugs, whereas teams can plan for features. Generally, a game team will know a feature they want to have years before they ship, because that's how long AAA games take to make. They take years to make, which means the features you want years before.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't know exactly how you want to use a feature years before. So as you get closer to wanting to use it, or you start trying to use it, you find that, oh, we thought we wanted it to work this way, but actually it doesn't work that way, and we want to work it this way. And so there's always a kind of give and take, and ideally a kind of iterative approach to development of giving someone something, having them try it out. Then the actual content creators try it out, and you get feedback and hopefully evolve it and make it better. But generally, features have a longer time period of planning.
Right. What sort of skills and experiences do you think that employers would value most to get to be working with a company like yours?
What I'm always looking for when I'm on a hiring panel is people who can learn, right? You're rarely hiring people at the peak of their career. Sometimes you are, but ideally, it's much more cost effective to hire young whippersnappers and train them up. So when you're looking for people to get into the games industry, like if you're already in the games industry and you've been here for 15 years, you've got ages of experience, and probably you've got people like trying to break your door down to get you to come and work for them.
Yes.
But when you're trying to break into the games industry, what people are looking for is, how keen are you? How do you think? Can you solve novel problems? We love it when people, on their resumes link to their GitHub, and you go and look at their GitHub and you can see their toy engine that they're making in their spare time. Like, that's fantastic if we can see people's code before we interview them. And then we can ask questions about their code, like, why did you do it this way?
Right. So it's about showing like initiative and showing your problem solving skills and stuff like that.
Yeah, like people who have side projects, that's always a big tick. Like, oh, this person is super keen on games, and even though they work for a bank, they are making a game on the side. Like, that's cool. We love people who show those kinds of things. And we also love people who can explain why they've done things. It's never good if you ask people, so what have you done? You're looking at your interview, what did you do at company X? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, okay, what problems did you solve? Oh, I'm not sure.
Sure.
You've got to be able to.
In terms of, you've got to be able to like explain your thinking and show that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Show that you're eager to learn, perhaps.
Yes, being eager to learn is, I think, the main thing. Like, we want people who can hit new problems and find answers to them. Like,
right. What about like specific skill sets or languages that they should be playing around with?
So if you want to work in games, I think C++ is a very important skill, and C# is a very important skill. There are generally two sides in game development in terms of, like, you want to be a programmer in games. There's the actual game itself, and then there's the tools that content creators use to make the game. And both of those things need to be made by programmers. And they're different skills. It's a different skill to make a tool that a content creator can then use to make a cool level, that a designer can use to design, an involved narrative tree. That is a different skill set than the skill set that's involved to program loading a level efficiently and having really fast loading times, or actual rendering rendering the graphics within the game is a different skill to designing basically a desktop application for content creators to use. So there are two sides to it, which do have different skill sets.
Do you find that either side lends itself to a certain type of person or skills, like interest, more than the other? Is one more creative and one more logical, or?
No, I think they're both. I think you need to be creative and logical always in programming.
Yeah.
You need to be logical,
agreed.
because ultimately you need to be able to write the code and make the thing come out the right you want, and be sensible enough to write tests for it and hit all the things that are required. But you also, I'm sure you need to be creative to be a programmer, even at a bank. You need to be able to have those brainwaves of, how do I solve this problem? Oh, I solve it this way. You need that creative leap. So I think both sides have that. I think as a programmer, you're probably not designing the game itself in most cases. You're not the ideas person who's like, okay, so we're going to have a big superhero character and some kind of tentacle alien, and they're going to have a love story. That's not a programmer's job for the most part.
Is there room for someone to hold both those roles? Someone that feels like a storyteller as well as a programmer?
I think in small companies and indie companies, you can certainly do those things. If you've got the ideas and you've got the programming chops and you want to write your own game, go for it. It's there's so many great tools these days so that you can do both jobs in a small team. In a big team, it's never going to be your job to do both.
Yeah, right. Did you I guess it might be hard for you to answer this, but how did the indie company compare to working at a large company that you're at now?
Because of the way I had that transition, which was to say my team got basically bought out and brought along, it was never a discontinuity for me.
Right.
And I've
work
also
kind of flowed on.
Work kind of flowed, the people flowed on. I was working with the same people in both scenarios. So, and the other thing is that, when I was with the indie studio, we were not, for the most part, making up our own games, because we were working for contract for another team who had the creative vision, and had, by the time I was working, somebody else was the designer and we were providing programming, heads for hire. But there have been times when, we do sometimes do game jams and things, which is always great fun to do a game jam with your colleagues and actually be responsible for coming up with the ideas for a fun game, and then learning that it's way harder. A game jam.
Game jam? What's that?
A game jam is when you can do it by yourself, I guess, but you and a group of people decide to make a game in a weekend or a week or whatever. So, someone decides, I'm going to be the lead designer, and you brainstorm a bunch of ideas. Like, okay, we're going to make a game that is unicorns in space, and they're going to shoot each other down with laser golf balls or something, and then you go and make it.
Like a little hackathon.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. Cool. Have you done some of those?
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We made something where some kind of platformer with cats. That was fun.
Love it.
Actually, as an engine team, it's really valuable to do a game jam, because you get to see what it's like to use the tools that you make, which is something that
that's interesting.
It's easy to accidentally forget to try day to day.
Yeah. What about barriers? Have you come across any barriers in your career as a woman in the games industry?
Again, I think I've been extremely lucky and I have never felt that being a woman was a barrier for what I wanted
That's
to do.
awesome.
I
That's
have,
so good.
we have had times in the past where I think being in Australia was a barrier. Um,
Yes, the Australian games industry is so much smaller than, say, is America a really big place for,
I think it was
I think
more,
South America?
I mean, when I say like Australia, so we used to have a problem within our studio that we didn't have any senior programmers,
Mm,
which is not to say we didn't have any people with the experience to be senior programmers. We didn't have any people with the career recognition to make them be senior programmers
right.
because we didn't have, we just didn't. We
Mm,
didn't have the, I guess we weren't seen as like important enough or experienced enough to require that level of person in our career. So we had this kind of artificial glass ceiling. But
mhm.
that's a thing of the past. That problem has been resolved kind of many years ago now. But that is a thing that did exist for a while. But it didn't exist at a point in time when I was personally like chomping at the bit and unable to progress in my career. It happened at a time when I was perfectly happy to be learning from more experienced people who maybe were chomping at the bit because they couldn't progress their careers as much as they would have liked. Um, so yeah, that hasn't stood in my way. I haven't ever felt blocked because of, certainly not because of being a woman, and very rarely
Mm,
because of where I am. My husband would be super
that's
keen for us
amazing.
to be like, oh, I'd like to move to Vancouver or Stockholm, but I don't want to move.
You like it here in Australia?
I like it here in Australia. I like it here with my
Yeah, fair
family.
enough.
I don't
Of
I don't
course, but you
feel
can take
brave
your
enough to
family
move
with
half
you.
the way across the world, but I can't take like my brothers and sisters and my mum and dad and everybody.
Of course. Of course. Well, for those people that might be watching that aren't locked by family, there's sounds like there's lots of opportunity. What about working remotely? Do
So
you have people
obviously
that work remotely?
since the pandemic, everything has changed with working
Yeah,
remotely. Prior to
exactly.
the pandemic, we as a company were really not into it. It was a thing that some people
Mm,
could do, but it wasn't a thing that was kind of expected to do. Whereas since the pandemic,
mm,
it is definitely something you can do. We
yeah.
have for our Melbourne, our Australian Frostbite team, we have a bunch of people who are remote only. We have people in
Mm,
Canberra who work with us, people in Queensland or New South Wales or South Australia. We have a bunch of people who are fully remote now, and it's not
yeah,
seen as
right.
any kind of detractor or like reason not to hire someone because they're in Queensland versus because they're in Melbourne. Um,
Fair enough. That's so good. What what do you think is the thing that you love most about your job?
I really love the people I get to work with. The people
That's
I
great.
work with are wonderful. They are so smart. They are so dedicated.
Hmm.
And they're just fun people to work with. I think that's a huge advantage of being in an industry where the thing that you're making is ultimately meant to be fun, is that
Yeah. Do you
people
feed
it seems
that
to attract
feeds
are
off?
fun people.
Yeah. It sounds like you're in a team that's like feeding off the like entertainment side of what you do. And is it a bit more of a light-hearted industry?
I mean, I don't really have anything to compare it with because I've never worked
Yeah.
professionally
Yeah.
outside of the games industry. Maybe
Yeah.
I'd find people fun wherever I worked. Maybe I'm just a real soft touch and just like people.
No. I'm tell you, they're not all good. I'm lucky enough to also work with great people. I think in the thing I think about programming, that we've touched on as well, coding, programming, games design, web design, anything, I should say development, it is filled with people who are really quite creative and really keen to solve problems and things like that. And I think something that I've noticed with young coders and developers, they find themselves saying that I'm not a creative person, but I guarantee every coder and developer I've met is so creative. Like you don't have to be into art and design to be creative. I think it's essentially like problem solving and like coming up with ideas, and it sounds like that's really
Yeah, problem
big
solving is
in
a
what you do.
creative skill. Like
Yeah.
it is not something you can get to by plotting.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow. Okay, well, I feel like we've touched on so many different topics during this chat. Like we've like ricocheted through your career, your study, and tips for people who might be interested in getting into it, and gender equity in the games industry. Why don't we wrap up and end on, I've got two more questions for you that are a bit
Okay.
more fun. What would be your dream project to work on?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a really tough
It
one.
is a tough one.
I guess it depends on what like there are the things that I daydream about working on, and that's like, I've worked in the games industry for, I'm not even going to try and do the maths, a long time, and I have my own little game ideas that are in my head, and I think probably if like what is my dream job, like, if I was going to retire and go out on a super duper high, I'd be like, it'd be really fun one day to have my own indie studio and to make my games. That'd be super fun. Um,
Yeah,
so
wow.
I have my little ideas that like sit in my head and I think
Yeah.
about. I was thinking about one of them in the shower this morning.
Oh, that's so
So
fun. Do you feel
that'd be
like you've
fun.
learnt that does sound fun. Maybe you can call me up when you get to doing that because I want to be involved. Do you feel like you've learnt skills over the course of your career? If you had all the time in the world, have you learnt the skills to like piece together a little game, like with all your coding skills, or would you still need to reach out to other experts?
I have enough confidence in myself that I fully believe I could write the whole thing if I really wanted to. But that
That's
would be a labor of
amazing.
love because I
Yeah, of
wouldn't
course.
I have been on an engine team for probably like
Mm,
10 years of my programming life. I don't want to use an off-the-shelf engine to make my daydream game, right? I want to write everything. I want to be responsible for everything in there. So I wouldn't want to just use Unity to make my game or whatever it is, right? I would want to use something that was written from the ground up, and it takes a really long time
wow.
to write a whole engine. So I probably wouldn't want to try and do it by myself. I believe I
Yeah, fair
could,
enough.
but probably not in like less than a
I'm sh-
century.
I believe you could too. Maybe we'll keep an eye out in 10, 20 years time.
I
All
definitely
right,
can't
let's
write it
end.
myself in my spare time in 10 years. This is like if I could live to be 200, maybe I could in my spare time write a whole game in a whole game engine.
Well, we'll see. I believe in you. What do you hope for the future of the games industry? What do you hope to see?
I would really, what I hope to see is a lot more gender diversity, a lot more gender equality. I want to see equal numbers of men and women
Mm,
coming in as candidates. That's what I want to see.
mm,
I think once that
yeah,
happens, that I know we're not hiring discriminately. Like once we have equal numbers of candidates, we'll have equal numbers of people coming into the actual roles. And then we'll have
that's
equal
it.
numbers of leadership positions in both. Because again, maybe I've got rose-colored glasses, but I don't see us discriminating about those things once people come in the door. We
Yeah,
just need the candidates to come in with
that's it. It's about
just need
making
the candidates to come in,
everyone comfortable.
and
It's
then
it's
we'll
about
have
making a comfortable space from the get-go. And I think like from time of studies up until leadership positions.
yeah. So that's what I would hope to see is that in a few years we have equality in
Yeah,
positions.
well, hopefully it
It'll
sounds
take
like
time.
we're seeing people like you in leadership positions, so that's really promising, and it is promising to hear that the percentages are growing from university people who are studying games industry things at university, games development, sorry. So yeah, it's about everyone, I guess, playing around, sharing those links on GitHub, like you said, showing your skill set for problem solving, and
Wanting to be
yeah,
there, right?
wanting to
Wanting
be
to be
there.
there and believing you can be.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily. Thanks for your time today. I realized as well, we call this coffee and code with Code Like a Girl, and we're both having water today. So, um,
This is my cup of, it's not coffee, but it is chai latte. So it's not
oh,
quite water. This
yum.
is this
That's
is my
good.
water mug here with my Winnie the Pooh on it.
Oh, very cute. Very cute. Well, thank you so much. I hope we've inspired lots of women and non-binary people to reach out and look into potentially getting into the games industry because
I
we
hope
need
so.
you.
We need
And
you, and it's a
it
great
sounds like
industry
a
full of
really fun place
great people.
to be.
And there could be
That's
way better people if
amazing.
there were just more of everyone.
That's amazing. Well, you can't have something created that's only created by one type of person, can you? So you need to have a whole representation of people in there. And yeah, sounds
Yep,
like we're working our way towards it. Not there yet, but on our way.
I hope so.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for today.
Thank you.